That's cool. They got a whole new alert thing saying recording in progress, and you're being recorded, and please accept. That's good. So everyone here joining us in Zoom, welcome, welcome. And those of you joining us, more importantly, on YouTube and Facebook, we are going to be looking at your comments. Please leave your comments, questions, and we'll take a look at them and answer them as we go, as best we can. It's a very big topic, and not all the time in the world to view it. We're only here for about an hour and a half, so we appreciate your patience as our speaker / presenter here, Payam Nagdi, is able to get through the presentation. So I'm going to do something really short and ask you all, if you haven't already, take a look at the website, www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. On this website, you can view the Zoom link. You can join on the Zoom link if you haven't already. And more importantly, you can also register for the other online talks like this one. We hold them weekly, and everyone is welcome to join. Now, with that being said, we have our speaker, Payam. Welcome. Hi, Payam. Can you hear me?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. All right. So everyone, this is Payam, and he is our speaker for today. Mr. Payam Nagdi is a Baha'i from Welwyn Garden City, Herts, United Kingdom. He is a software engineer and an entrepreneur who has worked on a number of successful projects within the gaming, healthcare, and retail sectors. Payam graduated with an MS in computer science from City University, London, and is currently working for the United Kingdom National Spiritual Baha'i Assembly as an IT systems engineer. Payam is also a dedicated Baha'i who enjoys giving interviews, talks, presentations on a variety of Baha'i topics and their implications within today's society. This includes deepening on Islamic topics, core principles in action, Christian topics, Jewish topics, presentations to schools, and many different civic groups. Now, this week's topic, which is a very interesting one, and I'm amazed that we found someone with the courage to talk about it. Thank you, Payam. Near-death experiences, comparative analysis to the Holy Scriptures. The effects of NDE on contemporary attitudes about the afterlife, in spite of religious reassurances about the next stage of existence. It is easy to fall prey to prevailing attitudes regarding death. And in the foreword to Elisabeth Kübler-Ross's seminal work, Death, the Final Stage of Growth, Joseph and Laurie Braga observe, death is a subject that is evaded, that is ignored and denied by our youth-worshiping, progress-oriented society. It is almost as if we have taken on death as just another disease to be conquered. That is a powerful quote, Payam. Thank you for sharing that quote. And more importantly, thank you for joining us today, all the way from the United Kingdom. I think it's about 5 hours, so you're about 4 p.m. over there, huh?
Yeah, 4 o'clock, just about, yeah.
All right. So it's almost already the end of your day, and it's just the beginning of ours here in Florida. Sunny, windy, and bright Florida. And the weather is perfect outside right now. It's abnormally cool compared to normal. Well, you guys can say you're in the UK. You've got our Gulf weather coming up to you all the time. So yeah, fun fact, guys, you know, United Kingdom has palm trees because those palm trees come from Florida or the Caribbean area. You got to thank the Gulf Stream for that. All right, so Payam, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for also
Sure.
talking and stalling a little bit because there's a few technical issues on this side.
Oh, yeah. You gotta share your screen. Did you do that yet?
Yeah, I'm just about to share my screen.
Okay.
So, admittedly, there was a lot of information. I couldn't get all of it onto my presentation, but I will try my best to share what I have in a way where it's helpful to everyone. So let me just find my presentation.
Yeah, so Pion's been working on this for several weeks, and still so much to do, but this is beautiful as it stands. I think everyone's gonna love it anyway. So don't feel too sensitive about it, Payam. This is a huge subject, and no matter how much you try, you'll never cover the scope of this subject. So don't worry.
That's fine. I can, it also gives us a chance to have more kind of insights at the end, questions and answers, and talk about, go into depth a bit more about what the Holy Writers say and what their life experiences really are. And it gives us a chance at the end for anyone that's, had any kind of encounters with anyone or even has had one, maybe you can share your experiences. So that'll be quite an interesting thing to look forward to. So near-death experiences. So this is something that, all of us has probably heard of, and some of us maybe not heard of. And it's something that's quite been an interesting subject for me personally, because I think, this really does give us some sort of sense of what, if there is some kind of afterlife, after this life, is there something after this, is there something that confirms what we read in religious texts, for example, or is it something that is just mere illusion and, hallucinations of people? So really just to dive into it. So what is a near-death experience? Like what is it actually explained as? So in the book by Debashi Roy, The Kingdom of Light, he tells us that it's a phenomenon that is experienced in a state of unconsciousness or coma, while the consciousness survives and later will arrive. That should be day. Having the delightful, mysterious experience of a different reality in an ineffable, intangible realm, where brilliant light of surpassing beauty has many manifestations such as God, souls, kingdoms, love, peace, and joy, which has a tremendous after effect parallel to spirituality. So this explanation really is quite, puts most near-death experiences into a nutshell. So it's the idea that there's people that have actually, been through some kind of injury or something that has caused them to leave the body per se, and go into this realm of love and beauty, and they see things and they gain understanding. And the most interesting part about it is that when they come back, their life has changed completely. Their outset, the way they actually manage their life and what they do to help other people. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. So just some history on it, how it came about. So there was a man named Dr. Raymond Moody, who was studying medical sciences at university. And during his sciences, he had people come up to him and tell him about these experiences of they've had after death, when they were pronounced dead at the time, they're through injury, through illness, through kind of surgeries, accidents, and so on and so forth. And they had told him that, they had actually left their body, that they've seen their body, and then they've gone to another world where they've seen brilliant light and felt this tremendous love and peace and so on and so forth. But then for some reason, they had to come back to life and come back to their body. So this really raised the interest of Dr. Raymond Moody, and after carefully studying, over 100 cases, he talked to many of these people. He published his book called Life After Life in 1975, and he coined this term near-death experience, which is now commonly used today to describe this experience of death. But Dr. Modi, he may have actually, just created the term, but it's quite likely that near-death experiences have existed ever since humanity has existed. This idea of potentially leaving the body and feeling these experiences, because throughout time, people do get injured, are pronounced dead, and have come back. So it's been a constant thing throughout history, and it doesn't make sense that it just started happening when Dr. Raymond Moody found out about it. so this is kind of how the history of how the term started and how the research really started picking up. It was from this point. So I just thought, it'd be nice to actually look at a specific near-death experience. This lady, Laura Martin, she had one during a surgical procedure, actually. And when they were operating on her, she had come out of her body. And this particular case is considered by a lot of NDE researchers to be a really classic case of near-death experience, because it covers a lot of aspects which are very common between all the near-death experiences. And it's a really beautiful explanation of the things you said. And just after each bit, we'll kind of take in mind what it's actually saying and how it's related to maybe some of the writings of the different texts, quite specifically the Baha'i writings. So what I'm going to do, I'll make a bit interactive. I'm going to ask 2 or 3 people just to read each bit, and then I can talk about it afterwards. So, the first thing she kind of she went through, she started talking about this idea of so she talked about this idea of feeling like unconditional love, and this is what this first section is about. It's really about the condition of love she felt and this all-encompassing knowledge that came about to her. So maybe we can ask Alex, are you happy to read this one?
Yeah, I can read. I was enveloped by total bliss in an atmosphere of unconditional love and acceptance. The darkness was warm and soft, a blanket of velvety love stretching endlessly. The freedom of total peace was intensified beyond any ecstatic feeling I've ever felt on earth. In the distance, a horizon of glorious white golden light beckoned me forward. As the brilliance increased and the encompassing rays stretched to meet me, I felt that time as we know it was non-existent. Time and existence were a blending and a melding of the past, present, and future into this one moment. A sense of all-knowing enveloped me. Every part of my being was satisfied with an unconditional love beyond description. All questions were answered. An inner peace without striving or achieving was created and understood.
Thank you, Alex. So this is really quite a beautiful explanation of how she felt. So this was when she first left her body, and she started going towards this darkness that she saw. And but in this darkness, it was just talking about this unconditional love, and this peace that we're feeling, something that she's never felt on earth. so nothing in her lifetime that she's ever felt. And then she started moving towards this light, and this is a very common feature in NDEs. We're talking about, we've heard it all before about the light at the end of the tunnel. So this is a kind of analogy of what this is talking about. And then, it talked about this light that touched her and everything seemed, one. So she talks about this idea of oneness and the sense of all-encompassing knowledge, which is a very beautiful description of, what it could be if we maybe do pass in the next life. So going on, the next bit was actually, this is a bit about seeing other spirits actually, and actually talking to people that she saw in the next life as well. So this is another very interesting part of the story. I'm going to ask maybe, let's see on the list. Maybe Nahid, do you want to read for us?
Sure. Before I became further engulfed in the light, I became aware of many spirits. They surrounded, embraced, and supported my journey with their gentleness, knowledge, and guidance. I felt one of them approach from my right upper side. This familiar presence came forward, and my feelings changed to sheer joy when I discovered my 30-year-old brother-in-law, the one who had died 7 months earlier from cancer. My essence moved to meet his essence. I couldn't see with my eyes or hear with my ears, yet I distinctively knew that it was Will's. I heard his smile, saw his laughter, and felt his humor. It didn't make sense, but it made complete sense. We were separate, but we were also one. It was as if I had come home and my brother-in-law was here to greet me. I instantly thought how glad I was to be with him, because now I could make up for the last time I had seen him before his death. I felt sad and a bit guilty for not taking the time out of my busy schedule to have a heart-to-heart talk with him when he had asked me to. I realized I was not being judged by him, but by myself. I was in his position, dying, wanting to say goodbye to those I loved, and then meeting people like myself, not getting it, not getting that all the achievement, money, or recognition in the world cannot be taken with you when you die. The only thing you take with you is the love you give away.
Thank you very much, Nahid. So another very beautiful section. So this is where she starts saying she became aware of spirits, specifically her brother-in-law had passed away a few months ago. And, it talks about this communication method, really, which is it seems to be very spiritual in nature and not a physical kind of communication. And, it's really nice to see this, and then it really opens your eyes to what it actually means to communicate in that world, and what it means in comparison to this world. And again, how does that compare to what the writings tell us in different scriptures, or what science even tells us even. And the last bit was even more interesting, where she said she realized she was not being judged by him, but by herself. So the pure fact that she has this raised consciousness, that somehow she's realizing her mistake, this particular mistake and other mistakes. And then she has this raised consciousness that, the only thing that really matters, is not the material things, but it's the emotional and spiritual things, and the love that you have in this life. So yeah, another beautiful section. The last bit then really talks about, sorry, it's not the last bit, the third bit is, it starts diving into this idea of her judgments and life reviews. So this is what is really quite interesting, and this is something that's very common in all near-death experiences. So I'm just going to call upon another reader. Maybe Oshan, can you read this one if you're there?
Of course. We'll keep the English accents going.
Yes.
Wills was like the spirit of Christmas past. By reviewing my past, I was brought to new places of discovery within myself. Many events were shown simultaneously. I recalled 2 examples. When I was 5 years old, I teased Tammy Fowler, another 5-year-old girl, to the point of tears. I was now in a unique position to feel what Tammy felt. Her frustration, her tears, and her feelings of separateness were now my feelings. I felt a tremendous amount of compassion for this child. I was Tammy and needed love, nurturing, and forgiveness. My essence gave love to both of us. A love so deep and tender, like the love between a mother and child. I realized by hurting another, I was only hurting myself. Again, I was experiencing oneness. The next incident was similar. I had made fun of Billy Bradley, a scrawny, malnourished, asthmatic kid. He died when he was 17 years old from a cerebral aneurysm. He seemed to be in the realm of existence I was in. Yet still I was not sure where I was. When Billy was 12, he had written me a love letter that I rejected. I was experiencing his pain, which became my pain. At the same time, I felt a tremendous amount of love for this boy and myself. My contact with him went beyond the physical, and I felt his soul. He had a vibrant, bright light burning inside of him. Feeling his spirit's strength and vitality was an inconceivable moment, especially knowing how much he physically suffered when he was alive.
Thanks, Oshan. So this part for me was very interesting. It's this idea that she started having this life review, you know, that was actually brought to her by her brother-in-law, and you know, all these flashbacks or examples in her life, and she recalled these 2 examples of when she wasn't necessarily very, very kind to certain 2 people, and it seemed that, you know, she started feeling what they were feeling in that time, you know. So in a sense, like the judgment she was receiving was from herself to herself, in a sense where whatever she did, she gained the consciousness of it, and she then had the empathy to feel what they were feeling. So it was raising that to that level of oneness that, you know, we're all from the spiritually same place, and we all feel the same emotions. And it's about that raised consciousness that really develops that interconnectedness that we have. So this is a really interesting section, and this is something that is also very common with other experiences, this particular life review that people have. So another really interesting section to ponder on. So now we come to the last section. So this part was about talking to her brother-in-law, realized that actually, like, you know, she couldn't stay, you know, so she had to go back. So her brother told her it was a mistake, and she had to go back to her physical life, which is another very common experience. Well, it is the ending factor of near-death experience. Otherwise, you just end up staying dead, I guess. Right. So I'm just going to call on someone else to read this bit. Maybe I'll find someone who doesn't have an English accent. Brownlee, are you there to read?
I was going to say I'm happy to change my accent to anyone you want.
That's fine. Yeah, we could get creative. I think if Brownlee's there, maybe she can read for us.
Sorry, I'm on the phone, so it's difficult to read.
That's fine. We can find. It's quite hard to go through this. Maybe.
I didn't feel like I knew anything, yet there was a place in me that knew everything. I asked Wills if I could stay. He said, "It's not your time yet. There's been a mistake. You have to go back." I remember thinking, okay, I'll go back, but I can get back up here. At that same instant, his thoughts were mine. You can't take your own life. Suicide for you isn't the answer. That won't do it. You have to go back and live your life's purpose. I responded, "I understand, but I don't want to go back." Will's thought came to me again. "It's okay. We're not going anywhere. We'll be here for you again." His last communication was, "Tell your sister I'm fine." With those final thoughts, I felt myself going back, dropping downward through darkness. I was not afraid. Instantly, I felt myself slam into my body.
Thank you for. So, 2 points that stood out in this section really. The first bit was the first sentence, what she said, she didn't feel like she knows anything, but actually at the same time, there's a place that she knew everything. You know, and this is another common theme that comes about, is this idea that people start having this all-encompassing knowledge that surrounds them, and they start an elevated level of consciousness, which makes them understand things that they probably couldn't do in this physical life, which is a very, very common phenomenon. It's a very interesting one as well. And then the second bit was this point, which all of near-death experience, in their near-death experiences this this kind of dialogue where they say, you know, you have to go back. It's not your time. And almost all of them don't want to go back. You know, there was another example where a lady, Mrs. Passaro, she actually felt like it was murder to go back to her physical body. And this is what she explains. There's a very interesting emotional feeling there, you know, where she wanted to say, well, maybe I can take my own life again and just come back up here. And then her brother-in-law was saying suicide isn't the answer, and you have to live your life's purpose. So it's very interesting dialogue, and this is something that happens with every near-death experience. So these were the 4 sections that I picked from her case. That she actually has a book which explains the whole story, and if you do want to check it out, she has a website. I think it's just her name, laurelinmartin.com, and then you can check out her story and what she does, what she's been doing since she actually had this near-death experience. And she's really been trying to reach out to people and talk about, you know, oneness and love, and trying to really unite the community. So it's been she has a really interesting, life-changing experience for her. And this has been the same for many people that have the similar kind of experience. So just from a case study, then so I've been talking about how things are quite common between each experience. And I've kind of created a list of I mean, it's obviously it's not an exhaustible list, but it's a list of things that seem to stand out. And they're not in any particular order, but it's things that seem to be very common between all near-death experience, people that experience it. So, in no particular order, this is again from the Baha'i Roy's book, In the Kingdom of Light. You know, your outer body experiences, freedom from physical feelings, passing through a tunnel. So they'll get to the tunnel and there's a light at the end of it. We've heard that expression many times. An ineffable feeling of love, joy, peace, and happiness. Light phenomena. So this idea of everywhere being light, encompassed by the light. Some people talk about the city of light and the light beings and the supreme being of light, which is the next point, actually, being the presence of God or a supreme being. So many near-death experiences have had this experience of being in front of God and the supreme being of light. So a lot of them called it, there could be none other than God. It's a life review, learning a lesson. So, you know, the most common reason why these things would happen probably is because there's a lesson to be learnt, or there's a purpose that people need to realize. And this is, you can saw that from Lauren's story, that she realized that, you know, material things don't matter. The people that she hurt, for example, you know, this is all stuff that's so important. And she actually does mention the story that, you know, it's your relationships with people that matter most in this life. And whatever you do will affect you in the next life. And this is a very interesting point. And then the last point was coming back. So this is obviously the core feature of a near-death experience. So otherwise it wouldn't be a near-death experience. So these are the kind of things, these are the ones that really stood out in most near-death experiences. And actually on the next page, we have some stats, actually, that was collected by a researcher called Kelvin William. And there's quite a few, there's a big table, but I just picked out the ones that I thought really stood out. So 69% of people experience overwhelming love. 62% had their life review. 56% saw God. 46 were given unlimited knowledge. It's amazing there. 46 were told it was not their time to die. Obviously, they do all come back, but someone was told of that dialogue. 37% said they met Jesus Christ. That's another very interesting point there. The last three were very interesting. 27% said they experienced fear. 19% said they experienced some form of hell. But then 0% said they saw that they didn't see the devil, or they saw Satan. They didn't see any kind of devilish form, which is a very interesting phenomenon when we look at many religious texts and how they talk about the idea of the devil and Satan. You know, if you have a bad life, you're gonna meet the devil in hell. So the last 2 points are quite interesting, where some people experience fear and then 90% experience something of hell. So there have been recordings of negative near-death experiences. And it was a similar kind of process, but then this negativity came about from this idea of having a life review, and then this raised consciousness. People understood some of the things they did in their life. There's some that they were judging themselves about some of the things they made. You know, and some of these near-death experiences, just trying to find an example. So it's people that it talks about here, people that had maybe really egocentric lifestyles, or someone who had committed some form of murder, or someone who had done something that really transgressed God or against the law. And people, these kind of people had, when they had the near-death experience, it was like hell for them, because they were essentially judging themselves, and it was the complete opposite of what they were feeling in that time. You know, that it was against the oneness that they were feeling, and it became a sense of hell, a sense of fear, a sense of a sense of regret and guilt, a sense. So that was a really, really interesting point that came about. And I think that really does conform with a lot of the writings, especially the Baha'i writings, where it tells us to take ourselves into account each day before you're summoned to a reckoning. Because I'm guessing, that reckoning from this stats tells us that account that we take of ourselves in the next life is actually ourselves with a higher level of consciousness. That's a very, very interesting phenomenon. So, so this leads us into kind of conflicting views. So there's kind of three viewpoints. We have the scientific viewpoint, we have the rational viewpoint, and then we kind of look at it from a religious standpoint. So in terms of a scientific view, near-death experiences has no conclusive outcome in science. There is no way to really measure, okay, this is what it does, this is how the brain works, and this is why it happens. There's no way of really measuring that. But there are a group of scientists and researchers which they're very skeptical, and then they completely they deny the experience, and they categorize it as something that's a hallucination or deception of the mind, some kind of illusion. But really, you have to ask the question, how do you reconcile some of the experiences and elements of a near-death experience that happens when they actually say that this is an hallucination? And some of the questions I've listed here, for example, what if it really is an illusion, and life after death, there's nothing after life, and our consciousness is based on how our brain works, what is consciousness that exists after death has been confirmed? What is that experience that people are having after saying they've been confirmed with death, and then they suddenly come back? And alongside that, if the brain is dying, and the brain is malfunctioning because it's dying, like, why is there such a enhanced level of sense and emotion and understanding in that period? And why does not happen when you're alive, or why does not happen with all dying brains in the same way? So if that was the case, people who are passing away, their brains somehow have some kind of enhanced understanding of what's going on around them. And then the last point is these hallucinations, that people call it hallucinations, that hallucinations actually take place in a state of consciousness. How do we actually say that this is a hallucination when in some cases there's no sign of brain activity at all? Like when they're confirmed dead, the brain isn't functioning. There's no detection from the electronic devices. So these are some of the points that science still hasn't really answered, and they can't answer because there's no way of measuring it. So really, this leads us to a more rational point of view. So what is the rational view? This is something that most near-death experiences and NDEs kind of agree with, is that the consciousness remains alive during a near-death experience. It survives death, and this consciousness is actually the soul of a human being, and the spirit of man. And they do travel into this realm of reality, into the next world of the life beyond. And when they come back, their life has changed, the way they think, the way their outlook on life. This is kind of the general agreement between a lot of ND researchers and people that have near-death experiences. And really, this rational view does kind of then, beg this understanding that, yeah, I guess this does confirm the existence of God or supreme being, of an afterlife, and the immortality of the soul. So because many of the religious writings tells us our soul is eternal, and we we do travel through the worlds of God when we pass to the next life. So this is kind of the rational view, and this is the view that most people that read in the near-death experiences kind of agree with. So on a religious standpoint, what does actually religion tell us about death and the afterlife? So we've got 3 quotes here. I'll just read these myself. I won't get anyone else to read them. But so the first one is from the Baha'i writings. It says, "O Son of the Supreme, I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? I made the light to shed on thee its splendor. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom?" From Baha'u'llah. Second quote is from the Quran, which says, "But ye prefer this present life, that the life to come is better and more enduring. This truly is in the books of old, the books of Abraham and Moses." And the last one is from the Bible, and it says, "A good name is better than a precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth." So quite clearly you can see that, all kind of major religions seem to talk about this existence of another life. And in fact, this next life is a lot better than this physical life that we're in currently. And it seems that, near-death experiences seem to complement these descriptions which are in the religious writings. But just on that point, there are some contradictions that do appear because of certain differences between fundamental beliefs of religions. Certain points in Christianity and Islam, maybe, or in Buddhism or in Hinduism. So a lot of these things, differences have arrived in what fundamental beliefs could be. And they could have arisen from potentially, lack of improper interpretations and lack of understanding what it's actually saying. So I've just given out a little list. So this is also a list given in the Kingdom of Light. It says, there's some religions that believe, for example, that God is a spiritual being. That God is a physical being, but near-death experiences tell us that God is this supreme being of light, or this spiritual being that exists. Many religions, Christianity, Islam, tell us that, heaven and hell, they're material places that we go to after we die. And then near-death experiences says that they're not material worlds, but rather they're spiritual conditions that we feel when we do go to the next life. So, and another big point is that a lot of religions think if you don't follow that certain religion, you're destined for hell, basically. So, where Christians say that Jesus is the way to God, and Muslims say something similar, and so do Jews. But people have near-death experience don't actually accept this. They say everyone has that same experience, and everyone goes through this experience in a similar way, and we can tell from the stats that they've all been quite similar. And then we talked about how none of these people that had the experience saw the devil or the Satan, but many religions do believe in the concept of the devil, Satan, as an entity which exists and plays a part in leading humanity to sin and temptation. And the last one is, these man-made dogmas, these kind of rituals, and that have appeared throughout time through religions, and it shows how, many of these kind of rituals have now become like a dominating feature of religion, rather than the actual the teachings and the spiritual teachings of the writings. And near-death experiences say it's not these rituals that matter, but it's a message that is given to us, and it's a message of love and oneness that we need to connect humanity together. And so yeah, in that sense, many religions find that near-death experience are contradictory. So they start to lean more towards this idea of the scientific view, where they actually say that it could be a hallucination, it could be some sort of malfunction. So you do find that actually many there's certain religious groups that actually really negate the idea of near-death experiences. So there is, however, the Baha'i faith, which when we look at the writings of the Baha'i faith, it seems to be in complete conformity with what the people who have near-death experiences say. So, it talks about all these aspects of, we talked about the outer body experience, kind of, the being of light, and all these kind of aspects. They seem to be really, heaven and hell, they seem to be really in conformity with all these experiences that have happened. And just for those that don't know what Baha'i faith is this newest Abrahamic religion, which focuses on the oneness of everything, essentially. And we believe it's a progressive revelation of all previous religions that have come in the past. And funnily enough, it's actually begun today, May 23rd, in 1844. So it's quite an interesting coincidence. So what I've done is the next section, I've kind of given some quotes from the Baha'i writings for each section, and I thought maybe we can talk about it a little bit and see what where that goes, because it's quite interesting how similar it is to what the Baha'i faith actually tells us. So I've got a few of the teachings here. So the first one is the outer body experience, and actually Baha'i faith tells us, the day the soul becomes detached from the body, it has but this second means of action without intermediary. In the same way, through the soul as a resident of the body, it is not to be found in the body. Excuse my typos. That says be found in the body. So, the Baha'i writing actually tells us the soul becomes detached from the body, and which means that it's telling us it's not actually part of the body. It's outside the body. It's kind of like it's a relationship which can't really be explained, but it's there. It's like when you look into a mirror. When you shine a light into the mirror, you see that light. It's not actually the light, but it's a reflection of the light, and that light itself in the mirror would be the soul, and then the source of the light would be where that soul is emanating from, and the mirror is the body. That's the kind of relationship that's kind of talked about in the Baha'i faith, where we essentially, the soul has never been part of the body. It's just got this relationship with our body, which is quite important. Which is why also it's very important to not cremate our bodies when we pass away, because there is that important connection there. The second one is light phenomena. So this covers a whole range of areas, which I didn't actually have time to put all the quotes in, so I'm just going to talk about them. But the basic of the quotes, the divine world is manifestly a world of lights, and essentially this covers all of it, in a sense where, in one sense, starting from a light towards a light at the end of the tunnel, and from there it leads into people entering into the light. And when they enter this light, they actually tell us, here it says the light was more brilliant than the light emanating from the sun, many times more powerful and radiant than the sun itself. Yet I was not blinded by it, nor was I burned by it. Instead, the light was a source of energy that embraced my being. So it talks about this brilliant light that exists, this light phenomenon, and how it really encompasses your whole existence and your whole being, which is a very very interesting, very beautiful actually thing to think about. And Abdu'l-Baha actually, he wrote to a mother who had lost a son, and in that he writes, you know, that beloved child addresseth thee from the hidden world. O thou kind mother, thank divine providence that I have been freed from a small and gloomy cage, and like the birds of the meadows have soared to the divine world, a world which is spacious, illumined, and ever gay and jubilant. I have shaken off the mortal form and raised my banner in the spiritual world. Following this separation is everlasting companionship. Thou shalt find me in the heaven of the Lord, immersed in an ocean of light. Again, this concept of the ocean of light appearing in this tablet. You know how, and also talks about how he was burst from this gloomy cage, which is a relation to the body. So you're actually been burst from the body, the physical world, and the physical body, and have now entered into this ocean of light, which is connection to God and all things that are one, essentially. The other things that people say about this light phenomena is, you know, besides the supreme being of light, which is here, but there's other beings that they say of light that they see, such as you know, we talked about Lauren Martin, and she saw this soul, these spirits, and her brother-in-law. She actually explains that these people were the light, were spirits of light, and so it's just a really interesting phenomena that actually is talked about in the Baha'i writings as well. In one of the hidden words, it says that, "O son of man, my calamity is my providence. Outwardly it is fire and vengeance, but inwardly it is light and mercy. Hasten on to that thou mayest become an eternal light and an immortal spirit." You know, and again he says, you know, the day star of unfailing beauty of his Lord will at all times shed its radiance upon him, and he will shine so brightly that no one shall bear to gaze at him. So it's really interesting that the Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, he talks about our souls as something that become an eternal light, or something that can shine so brightly that, you know, it'll be hard to gaze at that light. And this is something that is referred to by a lot of people that have near-death experiences, that they see these beings of light, and they see these forms that exist in that world. And another really interesting one is, people talk about this city of light. They see this city that is made of complete light. You know, in one experience actually said, you know, she saw multiple cities, and they wrote that each city is so superior to any on earth that is indescribable, and each succeeding realm is indescribably better than that immediately below it. It seems that the assignment to a specific city is contingent on the actions and attitudes of the individual while on earth. The key that opens the gate to a specific city of light is the ability to dwell in the light of that city. And this evidently depends on the behaviors during earth life. So that was from someone who had a near-death experience. And very interesting that talks about that, you know, each city of light has its own elevated station. And the last bit says it evidently depends on our behaviors during the earth life. So it seems that we have some sort of access to certain levels of cities of life, depending on, you know, our life on this world. And then just on that point, Abdu'l-Baha has kind of referred to the city of light as well. It says, "May the radiant sea of reality become clear and unveiled of its clouds, and may people be freed from the quagmires of the world of matter and soar upwards to the city of light." And you can see that this has also been referenced in the Baha'i writings, which is a very, again, it's a nice coincidence. Well, not coincidence, but if you believe in this, then you really think it's real. Yeah, and then obviously the last bit is the supreme being of light, where it talks about how a lot of people have seen this light, this supreme light, and they can only explain it as something that just emanates love, peace, compassion, and all these attributes like inexhaustibly. And they said the only explanation it could be that it's God, that it's some kind of supreme being, it's God. Some people have said that, you know, it's either Jesus Christ, like we read, or it was Buddha, they saw Krishna. Some people said they've seen Baha'u'llah in these near-death experiences. You know, it's been a very mix of different kind of people they've seen, but generally it seems to be around this idea of a manifestation of God. So these prophets that have come down are essentially manifestations of God, and each of them have seen these manifestations and called them supreme beings of light. You know, and this concept of, you know, God as this supreme being light actually does exist in quite a few religions. You know, in Hinduism, actually tells us, seeking for freedom, I go for refuge to that God who is the light of his own thoughts, he who first creates Brahman and delivers the Vedas to him. And again in the Bible it tells us, this then is the message which we have heard of him, and declare unto you that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. And then, you know, from the Quran, written a bit here, God is the light of the heavens and of the earth. His light is like a niche in which is a lamp, the lamp encased in glass, the glass as it were a glistening star. From a blessed tree it is lighted, the olive neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil would well nigh shine out, even though fire touched it not. It is light upon light. God guideth whom he will to his light, and setteth forth parables to men, for God knoweth all things. And that's from the Quran. So you can see that this is actually written in many of the religious writings, that this light that God emanates. And again, the last of the Baha'i writing, it says, blessed is he that hath set himself towards thee, and hasted to attain the day springs of the lights of thy face. So very much near-death experiences have a very, very strong connection to this light phenomenon that has many aspects to it. One I missed out is this freedom from physical pain, where, you know, it talks about that there is no kind of pain that we feel now. It's completely oblivious of that. You know, now the Baha'i tells us here that we see that cold, heat, suffering, etc., only concern the body. They do not touch the spirit. So it just this again kind of confirms what people with near-death experiences are saying, that there is no kind of physical kind of pain or any sort of such thing with the spirit or soul. It only belongs to this physical world. So the last two, I think, really quite important ones, is generally this idea of the emotion that people feel. You know, alongside what they see is what they feel as well. So the kind of feelings they have. More noticeably, and all, like we saw that most people said, 69% of people said that they feel this overwhelming sense of love. You know, and this is all over the Baha'i writings and many other religions as well, this idea of love. And, you know, this one really stood out, where it says, O son of man, I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. You know, it's this idea that, you know, God actually created us because he loves us. And it makes complete sense that the next world would have this overwhelming love that exists there. and this, so a lot of these said it was so deep that it was felt, that they felt it not just from themselves, but that other people around them, that emanated God's love through them. One person actually said, when this overwhelming unconditional love flowed over me and through me, every atom of my soul was bathed and altered in this light. All my scars and bad memories vanished instantly. None of it mattered except this love I was receiving. None of the bad times seemed real at that point. They were only learning experiences, and I could feel them flowing away, all the pain gone. Just this wonderful timeless moment where I was totally accepted for who I was and where I'd come from. And this is a very common theme with people that have near experiences, this overwhelming love. And another one is this one I thought really came down to these negative near-death experiences, where Bahá'u'lláh says, if thou lovest me not, my love can no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. So these people that had negative near-death experiences, it felt like, they were doing something that was really against the love of God. And the guilt they felt, the hell that they felt was purely for that reason, is because they were denying that love that God was giving out. And I think that's a really important point there. And we saw that Laurie Martin says the only thing that matters is love in this physical life, the love that we give away. And I think, this is the core foundation of how we judge ourselves, maybe in this life and the next life. And we talked about this earthly life review as well, which I'll come on to. But I mean, love was one of the feelings, but there's also many other feelings. As they said, they had this feeling of beauty. They saw everything was beautiful. And Baha'u'lláh says, abandon not the everlasting beauty for a beauty that must die. And this set not your affections on this mortal world of dust. So really, all these near-death experience had said that, the next life was beautiful. There was all kinds of beauty that they saw there. Another one was a feeling of joy. One person wrote, then I simply remember I became more blissful, more rapturous, more ecstatic. I was just feeling with this light and love that was in the light. The dynamics of this light are not static at all. They are so dynamic, and so much going on here in the love and joy and knowledge. As you take it into yourself, or as it goes into you and you receive it, your ecstasy level becomes tremendous. So this actually, in terms of percentage, this is also very high in terms of the list of stats. This was about another 65% of people said they felt this ecstasy of joy, this brilliant joy and happiness. And then the last one we saw was peace. Peace and contentment. People felt this extreme sense of peace that they'd never felt on earth, or they don't think they'll ever feel on earth if they had to go back. One person actually said, there is no pain at the moment of death, only peaceful silence, calm, quiet, but you still exist. So it's this idea that you just, this idea of nothingness, really, you're just so peaceful that nothing else matters in that sense. And then Baha'i writings tell us, for example, likewise the rewards of the other world are eternal life, which is clearly mentioned in all the holy books, the divine perfections, the eternal bounties, and everlasting felicity, and the peace obtained in the spiritual worlds after this leaving this world. Baha'u'lláh tells us, with the joyful tidings of light I hail thee, rejoice. To the court of holiness I summon thee. Abide therein that thou mayest live in peace forevermore. So another really beautiful sentiment. Right. And the last thing that I wanted to cover was this earthly life review that we have that is compared to the writings. And this is something that's very common in all religions, actually. So every religion has talked about this kind of judgment that we get, day of judgment, or there's all kinds of comedy sketches of people going to heaven, and there's someone at the gates with a book writing down your deeds and judging you by it. These all kinds of different kind of visionaries of it. And this one particularly is from the hidden words of Baha'u'llah, which I didn't quote again. So, O son of being, bring thyself into account each day ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. For death unheralded shall come upon thee, and thou shalt be called to give account for thy deeds. I mean, that is clear as day. It tells us exactly that as soon as we do go into the next life, we will have to give account for our deeds. And this is a direct, parallel to one, the story of Laurie and Martin that we read earlier. Very, very beautiful that, in fact, we do give accounts for our deeds, but the only thing it doesn't mention is how, and these near-death experiences have given us a bit of an insight, I guess, of how it could happen. It's actually us judging ourselves, with a high level of knowledge and consciousness. And it's really, really quite an interesting perception to think about. There are many of these examples in the Baha'i writings. The Bab actually tells us, when this mortal life is sure to perish, and ye shall soon find yourselves in the presence of gods and will be asked of your doings. Or Baha'u'llah tells us, when breathing their last, be made aware of the good things that have escaped them. After their physical death, estimate the worth of their deeds and realize all that the hands have wrought. So Baha'u'llah actually himself tells us here that we will have this consciousness when we pass of all the good things that have escaped us, and all estimate the worth of our deeds in this life, and all the things that we've done that was bad. And it's quite interesting that it's directly parallel to what people are saying in near-death experiences. Another one here, when the human soul soareth out of this transcendent heap of dust and riseth into the world of God, then veils will fall away and verities will come to light, and all things unknown before will be made clear, and hidden truths be understood. So all things unknown before will be made clear. And we read earlier on that Maren told us that, all questions were answered. Everything that she had thought of in terms of life and other concepts about things that she'd done, everything was answered. And I think that's another very interesting viewpoint. So these are kind of the ones that I touched on, but there are a lot more, and I think I had to cut it in terms of time as well. But there's all kinds of different ones, like we didn't cover meeting with loved ones, but there's all kinds of writings about that in the Baha'i faith and other religious texts about meeting your loved ones in the next life and recognizing the ones that you spent your time with in this life, from the past and present. We talked about this idea of the way they communicate, telepathic hearing per se, how people, how do people communicate with each other next life? And we read about a little bit of an example of that in Laurelyn's story. I'm using the word telepathy, but we don't really know what it is. We just know that it's a form of communication that doesn't use the physical senses. This concept of no time and no space, so everything seems to be free from time and location. And again, this is paralleled in the Baha'i writings, where Abdu'l-Baha tells us, for the kingdom of God is sanctified, free from time and space, time and place. It is another world and another universe. And we talked about unlimited knowledge, we've kind of covered that a little bit, with the doors of divine wisdom and infinite knowledge fling open before thy face. So it just goes to show that there are a lot of parallels, and also this is all from other scriptures as well. When we look at the core of all the writings, I gave you some examples from the Quran and the Bible, Hindu writings. They all say very similar things, and I think the the reason why certain other religions maybe don't find it contradictory is because maybe they're following an understanding that was developed outside of the actual original writings. And it's quite interesting to kind of ponder on that, really. But when we look at kind of the Baha'i teaching, which is the latest religion, and it's the one that we have all the original texts for, it just shows that everything that was written here has a really, really similar parallel in the holy writings. And I guess the last thing we want to really just mention is what everyone that's come back from these near-death experiences, they've had a complete change of life. Some go on to try and tell others about about the next life and how we should try and be united and love. One lady, Renee Passaro, she became a Baha'i actually after she had this near-death experience, which is because she realized the writings had exactly the same kind of connotations of what she saw in the next life. And she actually met Baha'u'llah, where she said, but Baha'u'llah told her that he called himself the Blessed Beauty, which is very interesting. And there's all kinds of different people that have come back, and it just goes to show that each of us really have a purpose in this life. It's not an arbitrary place where we just live it and then that's it. But we all have a way, we all have a purpose of somehow connecting with other people, trying to unify the way we live, have a similar vision, unity of vision. And I think all these experiences have really shown us that this is really what it comes down to, is to spread that love and joy between us, between humanity, and to really bring people out of the darkness and to try and move people towards the light. And I think this is really the lesson that we should take from it. We shouldn't think, okay, so now I know I'm going to die, I just don't know it's going to be good in the next life. I think there is a aspect there, especially this idea of having that life review and that judgment, and also understanding that everything is created from love. And I think really that these experiences give us a means of understanding and really empowering of how we should live our lives and how we should really strive for unity. This, and I think a lot of the religions do reflect this. When you look at the writings of the Bible, the Quran, the Baha'i writings, Hinduism, Buddhism, there a lot of it talks about this concept of loving one another, being this concept of brotherhood, this concept of uniting neighborhoods and nations and countries. And so it's a really important message, and I think this is something that really we should be taking away from these experiences that people have. Now, I mean, I think I've talked a lot, so I think we're okay for time. So I just thought we'd maybe go into the next session, and if anyone's got any questions or insights they want to share, I think maybe this is the time to do it.
So there are some questions,
Mhm.
and Shaheen Qudusi asked a question about this, and it's a pretty good question. He says, have you ever pondered why in near-death experiences people still see things visually with the same limitations of human vision? For example, they don't see in the ultraviolet spectrum, they don't see in the infrared spectrum, gamma rays, X-rays, radio rays. you name it. Why is it that they process with the same perceptions of a human being?
Well, for me, I think, when we're looking at what I just said about these near-death experiences, and I think, there's an underlying purpose of why people have these experiences. And I think it really comes down to spreading a message to the rest of us. And I think this is what I was trying to express at the end, is that near-death experiences are there to give us a message, not just them, but also it allows us allows them and us to pick up the message. So it wouldn't make sense to suddenly maybe see things differently, I guess, if that is the core purpose of having a near-death experience. If it's there to make us understand a purpose or some sort, it has to be there, something that we're familiar with. And there's a story actually of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. Someone once asked him, why does God bring down manifestations? Why doesn't he just come down himself and give the message? And
good question.
Yeah, and then Baha'u'llah actually said, so how does a parrot learn to talk? And he says, what you do, you put a mirror in front of a parrot, and the parrot will see itself, and then you stand behind the mirror and you say things. And the parrot looks in the mirror thinking that this parrot is talking back to him, and it starts learning how to talk and repeat what you're saying. Now, if I took that mirror away and it sees my face, it would be so scared it wouldn't know what to do. It wouldn't learn as fast, and it just wouldn't learn in the same way. And that concept applies to the manifestations of God. So God reveals his messages to us in a way where we're familiar with. So if it came down in any other form, we wouldn't get the message. We wouldn't learn the lessons. We wouldn't pick up the things that we do today if it wasn't in the format that was comprehended by us, per se. And I guess this is why maybe that answers this question, Shaheen, that we don't see in other ways. I'm sure with whatever goes on next life and God's creation, there is all sorts of ways that we could see and perceive things. But also the writings tell us that the next life can't be described by ink or pen as well. So that there is that concept too.
Well, you could also use Plato's allegory of the cave for people who are not familiar with the Baha'i teachings. The idea is you have an experience that's otherworldly, and you have no faculties of description with the things of this world, the descriptions of our language, the limitations of our language. How are you to describe something that someone cannot perceive? Because again, they only see shadows on the cave versus the light that you went out and saw outside, the world outside the cave. So Plato's allegory of the cave is a very good example, this limitation of faculty versus the unlimited world beyond. So there is a question from John Hockness from North Dakota. This is on Facebook, and he's been patiently waiting for like 40 some minutes. So here we go.
Talk a lot.
No. I'm just saying.
No, I'm joking. Okay.
You're hilarious. Yeah. If I were to agree with you as part of the joke, someone might be offended. So I didn't agree, but I got the joke. It's funny. He says, Abdu'l-Baha said to use professional guidance, and that extrasensory phenomenon exists, but is not reliable. Where is the proof that these ideas, the NDE experience that one has, are not imaginings from the person and what the person's ego wants to imagine? That's the first part of the question. And then he asks, and how is this different from psychoactive substances creating the same thing, the same experiences, which he's assuming to be the same experience?
Right.
So how do you distinguish what you have in an NDE from a vain imagining, like potentially, I guess he is processing to be one produced by a psychedelic substance or what have you, hallucinogenic substances?
So when one thing that I talked about was the common features that seem to happen in near-death experiences. Like, there seems to be a very similar pattern, which, it doesn't necessarily correspond to people having different kind of vague imaginings and seeing what they want to see. And you find that actually a lot of these experiences, things come up that they might have forgotten, like experiences from the past that has happened to them, but they didn't remember it. And a lot of people talked about they suddenly learned things that they had forgotten, so forgotten knowledge per se. Things that they previously know, and now they previously knew and they forgot about it, but now they know again. And then it just seems that there's quite a few aspects to a near-death experience which doesn't really correlate to someone on psychedelic drugs, for example. It doesn't cover all of the areas that they get, so it doesn't cover this. Not everyone has, say, they have overwhelming love, or not everyone says that they suddenly gain like ultimate knowledge, and not everyone says that they meet other people and people that they love. So I think there's some features within near-death experiences that are quite common between all of them. And although there are varying experiences, I think they're all kind of in the same kind of nutshell. So I think at a high level, that's kind of why you wouldn't think they're vague imaginings. And these experiences have happened with atheists, right? So the atheists don't believe in God and life and the afterlife and the soul and stuff. And then when they have the experiences, they meet God, and they see things, and they talk about things that they never really read about in religion, or they never talked about, but it matches up exactly what some religious writings say. And that stuff isn't just vain imaginings, because vain imaginings generally come from things that you've conjured up in the past potentially, or some kind of thought processes that led to that. But and these people come back to life, and a lot of them become religious, or some of them, a lot of them, majority of them actually become religious. And it's a very interesting phenomenon. Like, you don't really see that happening with people that take drugs. Like, they don't suddenly become religious overnight. And I think that's another thing, then start suddenly believing God and these things. And I think, so there's a lot of different aspects of NDEs that I don't like. It doesn't seem like there could be just vain imaginings. I mean, there are probably some things that feel like that because maybe of acquired learning. But I think there's a genuine pattern that happens with everyone that has these experiences.
Thank you. And John Hawkness, we hope we answered that question. I think it was, I think it answered it, but then again, I'm not him. And we're looking, if you comment anything, we'll follow up with the comment that you left. So don't worry, John. All right.
Someone just asked me actually if I've had a near-death experience. I tried, but no, I haven't. I'm joking. I've never had one. But I'm just very interested in the subject, because I think it's a very good proof of what can come next.
So there is a question about, this is from Alex Clark, one of the readers today. And Alex, if you'd like to ask the question yourself, feel free. We appreciate your different voice and extra explanations to your question. But there he is. All right, Alex.
Sure. Yeah, so just wondering if there are some common elements of near-death experiences that seem to be unsupported or rather contradicted in the Baha'i writings. Like, one example that I've seen multiple times is that NDEers become aware of past lives that they've had, although I don't know how often that's experienced. Like I don't have a percentage like you showed in one of your slides. Whereas Abdul Baha refutes the idea of reincarnation in some answered questions. So just wondering if there are other examples that you were aware of.
I do actually have a stat for that if you want to know. So 21% of people said they were told of their past lives. Now, what that actually means, like, I couldn't really find much more than that. Just the fact that they said that they were shown a past life of theirs. And you know, we talked about in the writings, what I've seen in the writings, how, you know, people do return to this life, but not in the sense that they're the same person, but just share the same qualities and attributes. And that is quite a common theme in the Baha'i writings anyway, where you know,
like for example, John the Baptist was the return of Elijah, that concept.
Exactly, yeah, that kind of concept. Or, you know, we talked about how a lot of the letters of the living, which were the first believers of the Bab before Baha'u'llah, they were return of the many previous souls in previous dispensations. Like the 12th Imam, they were the 12 Imams of Islam, and you know, the wife of Prophet Muhammad, Fatima was Tahara, and all of these concepts. And I think potentially there could be a connection there with when it talks about these past lives, as that, you know, previous souls that had exactly the same spiritual qualities. And because at the same time, there's been a lot of life reviews which I've read, specifically one of Renee Passaro, where she talks about how she was shown the progression of humanity, which is a very interesting experience, and how things have developed for that time, and how she saw souls that were very similar in nature. And I think there's definitely some kind of connection there in terms of, you know, it wouldn't be actually that you live that past life, but you have a connection to it because of the spiritual attributes. But again, this is not, I'm not saying this conclusively. This is just something that I've analyzed when I've read about it. I don't know if that kind of helps your perspective, Alex.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. Thank you.
And there are a lot of writings on the subject in multiple scriptures. Like I explained the one reference with regards to John the Baptist being the promised Elijah. The Baha'i writings speak specific to this, and you can actually find a lot of Christian apologetic writings on the subject of why the inconsistency. Why does Jesus say John's the return, but John says he's not? Whereas the Baha'i writings also confirm that, yes, he is the promised Elijah, but again, it's the qualities of Elijah that he was exhibiting. Hence, in a way, he was that return, but he was not in the sense of his unique soul. And likewise, Baha'is believe the same about Baha'u'llah being the return of Jesus Christ. That is another whole nother story, whole nother subject, but nonetheless, similar in principle of these past lives. So there was a reference request from one of the viewers, Pauline Vaz, asking about this world being a mere shadow of the true life, and if there's a quote about it. And I think Alex Boyson was kind enough to bring a quote saying, and this is from the Baha'i writings here, "Know thou that the kingdom is the real world, and this nether place is only its shadow stretching out. A shadow hath no life of its own. Its existence is only a fantasy and nothing more. It is but images reflected in water and seeming as pictures to the eye." And that's intriguing. And there's,
So, and I was just saying, I think Alex actually had a question as well himself.
Alex Boyson?
Yeah.
Yes. We were getting to it as well. There's several of them. So, Alex, would you like to ask your question that you wrote out here? I can also read it off as well, so you don't have to worry. Sometimes I've read his questions. I'm going to read his question. So his question is, maybe we should ask ourselves what the role of dreams are. What similarities do you see between the role that dreams play, where they show us the truth, albeit usually in a distorted form, and the role that MDEs have for the individual, also showing the truth and offering life lessons?
So very interesting and good question, Alex.
Thank you, John.
So yeah, there is definitely a very close relationship to dreams. I think, Baha'u'llah actually tells us that the phenomenon of dreams proves the existence of the world beyond this world. And, there are many aspects of dreams that are actually very similar to having a near-death experience, such as, having no physical body, meeting dead relatives, feelings of peace, flying through space, learning about things maybe you didn't see in your physical life. There are many aspects of dreams that could actually play a part. And religious life, especially the Baha'i faith, does not deny the idea that you could enter the next worlds in a dream. There are many examples of believers that have had dreams that gave them a vision of some sort. Qudus himself, one of the letters of living, he met the Bab in a dream and had a conversation with him. And then through that dream, he knew exactly where the Bab was. And he went to Shiraz, exactly knowing where he lived. And so it was these phenomena can happen in dreams as well. There's no denying it, but there's many of these stories of dreams inside the Dawnbreakers book. I don't know if most Baha'is have heard of it, but if you haven't heard of it, it's a book about the early beginnings of the Baha'i faith and the Babi faith that talks about many of these believers that had dreams that led to them believing in God or having a life-changing experience. And this is very much similar to a near-death experience, which then goes to show that all of this is spiritual in nature. They all come from the same place, all from God essentially. And it just maybe NDEs have a more kind of enhanced experience potentially, because they're actually out of the body. The body isn't functioning, and I think maybe that causes a more enhanced experience per se. But I think there's definitely a very similar comparison relation to what you can experience in dreams as well.
Well, there are some writings from the Baha'i writings on dreams, and actually we have a video on Clearwater Baha'is, the YouTube. The presenter was Mr. Joubert Hakim, Baha'i Cosmology, Communication of Spirits. There is a slide from his presentation that I can read from that kind of talks about this. Abdul-Baha classifies dreams into three categories. Ruyaye Sadiqe, true dreams. They are as bright as the morning sun and do not need interpretation, tabir. They come to pass in the same manner as it was seen, but most of the people do not achieve this. It needs a heart rid of all attachment, and there must not exist idle thoughts in the mind. Ruyaye tabiri, interpretive dreams. These are idle thoughts from the heart or mind and need interpretation. Idle thoughts must be separated from spiritual discoveries. Abdul-Baha explains thus: if you add any color to a white cloth, it will accept it. But if you add blue to a yellow cloth, it will become green, and the truth is distorted. In order to have the true color, one needs to remove the added color. And then the third, as Ghath Ahlam, confused dreams. if man is involved in strife and contention during the day, and these events appear to him in his dreams, these cannot be interpreted and are no discovery. Finally, he adds that in the sight of the prophets, ruya is part of wahi, in which they see a celestial figure who tells them to say or to do things. And this can be found Baha'i Cosmology, Communication of Spirits, the video on the Clearwater Baha'is channel. Feel free to take a look. There's a lot more in the subject of dreams. Baha'i writings are very, actually, they go a lot into dreams, more than we can cover here in even one presentation. But there are some quotes in the Baha'i writings that are relevant to what we were talking about today. And anyone who is interested, they can start a Ruhi Book 1 study circle about reflections on the life of the spirit.
Yes.
And you have Life and Death, which is, I think, the third unit of the book. And of course, it says that material bodies are composed of atoms. When these atoms begin to separate, decomposition sets in, and then comes what we call death. Not death. The point is, though, that with the soul, it is different. The soul is not a combination of elements. It is not composed of many atoms. It is of one indivisible substance and therefore eternal. It is entirely out of the order of the physical creation. It is immortal. So the Baha'is believe in, obviously, an immortal soul, as we've just said it. However, the rational soul, or the human spirit, does not subsist through this body by inherence. That is to say, it does not enter it. For inherence and entrance are characteristics of bodies, and the rational soul is sanctified above this. It never entered this body to begin with. Imagine your body, the soul never entered your body. And that it should require, upon leaving it, some other abode. No, the connection of the spirit with the body is even as the connection of this lamp with a mirror, in the case Abdullah was explaining. If the mirror is polished and perfected, the light of the lamp appears therein. And if the mirror is broken or covered with dust, the light remains concealed. So it's very, very valuable, the quotes from the Baha'i writings on this subject, because the Baha'i writings clearly state, I'm going to repeat it again, the soul, okay, does not subsist through this body by inherence. That is to say, it does not enter it. For inherence and entrance are characteristics of bodies, and the rational soul is sanctified above this. So it says it never entered this body to begin with, that it should require, upon leaving it, some other abode. So you don't ever have an entry point for the soul into the body. You never have entry into the body. You have an association of the soul with the body. And that's very, very valuable to recognize that the soul is using your body as a vehicle, more so than actually within your body. And this is a huge departure away from many traditional beliefs that your soul is somehow inside you.
Yeah, it's a very good explanation. Thanks, John.
There is another question from Jeanette. Jeanette's question, Jeanette M. She asks, was there a link between how long the injured person stayed in the coma and the duration of their experiences?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, in terms of, if you mean how long they were out into the other realm, I think in terms of the experiences they feel, because we know that in the next realm, it tells us there's no concept of space and time. So you could essentially have many experiences, even though maybe you might be in a coma for maybe a couple of minutes and come back. And I think there have been cases where people have only been gone for a small amount of time, whereas to people that have been gone for a long time. And I think you find that experiences that they have are quite quite specific to them. And I think that comes down again to purpose, and the reason why they would have those experiences is to learn some kind of lesson, to learn some kind of meaning that is important to them specifically. So that is an interesting question, because that could then something maybe to look into, beg the idea of whether those that have been gone for seconds, do they have a near-death experience, whereas those that have been gone for maybe half an hour or so. And I think that's a really or even longer. There's been people that have been gone for a long time. So yeah, very thought-provoking question, Jeanette. But I think to answer that, really, the experiences they have, I think, is irrelevant of how long they've been gone from this world, per se, because of the lack of time and space in the next world.
Did you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm Daniel Octo.
Hello, how are you?
And I just you was talking about the body and the soul, the soul, yeah. And I just want to share a little experience. When I was in my young 20, I was in a group for a weekend, and I was in a building doing meditation for 9 hours in a row. So after that 9 hours, at one moment, I just clicked I hear a little noise like a click of the nail. And I was so, the feeling that create me, my soul just fly high in the air, like I was a rocket or going very fast. I was in a light, very like when you see a departure of rocket. And then after that feeling, I came back, because I was for 9 hours. We tried not to think. We just tried to feel the meditation. And then when it was finished, that experience, the very strong light, but I went back to my experience, and for 3 days in a row after that 9 hours meditation, I was the feeling I had is I was walking like 3 feet over the sidewalk. For 3 days, I was in that feeling. And everywhere I go, I feel everything. The wall. I have the feeling that I have an elephant in a small place, because my body was not my body, but my soul was extended outside my body, and it was my first real experience of this. Just I want to share that, and I excuse I'm a French speaking, so my English is not so good, but that was a good experience.
That sounds amazing. You had similarly had that out of body experience. Really, that's it's been known to be possible as well without in a conscious state. So it seems you had some kind of experience like that in a conscious state, which is that's very very nice to hear. So thank you for that.
Yes. So we have a question from Jale Sian of the Clearwater area.
Mhm.
And if she wants to unmute herself, she is more than free to. Please do, Jale.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Payman. Payam, thank you.
Sorry.
The question is a concept of love of God when we go to next word is very strong, and it will affect how much love of God exists in this world. How about those people who has strong experience of love, because they are very loving people, kind people, and they do so many good things, but they don't have love of God in this world? So many people in this, atheist people, fall in this category. What about them?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the one we read, Laura Martin herself, she wasn't religious, but when she went to that life, she felt this unconditional love, this love that she'd never felt on earth. And I think, you know, even for us that have a love of God, I think in this world we don't truly still understand what that means until we go to the next life. And I think, you know, there's a level of sense and emotion that we gain in the next life that is not describable compared to what we feel in this life. And I think that's a universal concept. It doesn't matter if, you know, you have this love of God in this life or you don't. And I think, you know, the love that we feel is a universal concept. You know, Al-Baha says the greatest force in this universe is love. And, you know, that is that statement can be expounded on for paragraphs, because love itself is such a big area of exploration. And I don't think as humans we have full capacity to feel it to the extent that we do when we go to the next life. And I think this is why a lot of the holy writings talk about next life being better. And, you know, we come out this cage that we're in this physical life, because the love that we feel in the next life is undescribable. And I think that's a universal concept. I hope that helped.
Well, thank you so much for asking that question, dear Jale. And more importantly, everyone who, so there's a question, wait, Alex, you said, yes, Alex, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, even atheists can love the attributes of God, you know, truth, justice, unity. Yeah, many people that don't believe in God, you know, truth, justice is a big thing in the world today. Love itself is a big thing. You know, a lot of these attributes of God are very much experienced in today's world, if you're not religious.
And Leslie asked the question of Tampa, will this be available in the Clearwater Baha'i Facebook page? The answer is yes, it is streaming live right now. And it is also streaming live on YouTube. So I mentioned the video about cosmology, Baha'i cosmology, communication of spirits. This video is streaming live as well on YouTube. And you can access both of those videos, the one about dreams that I referenced in this particular video, you can view it on YouTube. Right now it's streaming live. It will be temporarily unavailable until YouTube processes and then it gets put up again. But the Facebook live video is up, it is running, and it will remain there. So please feel free to share the Baha'i Center of Clearwater Facebook page. Yes. And likewise, Payam, if you want to share the video, it's right there. But yes, Leslie, it's on the Clearwater Baha'i Center Facebook page. So that being said, thank you everyone for joining us. This was a scintillating session on near-death experiences. And Payam, I assume you will want to probably follow up on this subject as it is so vast. But until then, we hope you all will enjoy what we have here in the references to the Holy Scriptures that were presented for further study, and some of the studies that Payam presented. And the materials will be made available online as well. Jeremiah will be putting it up on the descriptions on the websites. So please feel free to get that when it becomes available. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you have a beautiful Sunday. Thank you, Payam.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. Lots of love.